The wind off Lake Michigan howled against the glass doors of the Volkov Grand Hotel, but for Ophelia Jones, the real chill came from the red negative numbers on her bank app. She stood for a moment in the service alleyway, pulling her thin, threadbare cardigan tighter around her chest, trying to shield herself from the biting Chicago winter that seemed determined to find every hole in her clothes. Her phone buzzed a low battery warning illuminating the cracked screen where 6-year-old Lily smiled back at her, hugging a worn-out teddy bear. That smile was the only reason Ophelia was standing here at 7:58 a.m., her toes numb inside boots that had lost their waterproofing 2 winters ago. Lily needed her asthma medication, and the pharmacy didn't accept IOUs. "You're late, Jones." Mr. Henderson, the hotel manager, barked the moment she stepped inside the warm, pine-scented corridor. He checked his watch, his face pinched with annoyance. "That's the second time this week. The bus broke down isn't a valid excuse in the hospitality industry. One more strike and you're out. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, sir." "It won't happen again," Ophelia said, keeping her head down. She couldn't afford to argue. She couldn't afford pride. She hurried to the locker room, changing into her uniform with trembling hands, not just from the cold, but from the terrifying reality that she was one mistake away from homelessness. 10 minutes later, Ophelia was navigating a heavy linen cart through the side of the opulent main lobby toward the VIP elevators. The Volkov Grand was a palace of gold leaf and marble, decked out for Christmas with a tree that reached the ceiling. It was beautiful, and it was dangerous ground for housekeeping staff who were meant to be invisible. In her rush to make up time, she didn't see the patch of melted snow near the concierge desk. Her worn boot heels skidded. The heavy cart lurched. Ophelia gasped, trying to correct the weight, but momentum was against her. She stumbled forward, colliding hard with a figure in pristine white who had just stepped around the corner. A hot cup of coffee went flying, splashing dark liquid across the front of an immaculate white suit jacket and expensive Italian shoes. The crash echoed through the cavernous lobby. Then silence. Absolute, terrifying silence. Ophelia looked up, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had crashed into Madame Elena Volkov, the owner, the Ice Queen, the woman whose family name was whispered in Chicago with a mixture of reverence and fear. Elena stood perfectly still, the coffee stain blooming on her chest like a wound. Her face was unreadable, her eyes sharp and cold as polished steel. "You clumsy idiot." Mr. Henderson appeared out of nowhere, his face purple with rage. He grabbed Ophelia's arm roughly, his fingers digging into her skin. "Madame Volkov, I am so sorry. This incompetent girl is fired immediately. Get your things, Jones. Get out of my hotel." Ophelia's knees shook. The heat of shame burned her cheeks. I'm so sorry, madam," she whispered, not begging for her job, but genuinely sorry for the mess. She stood straight, despite the fear, refusing to let Henderson see her cry. "Stop." The word wasn't shouted, but it carried more weight than Henderson's screaming. Madame Elena raised a single hand. Elena looked down at the coffee stain, then up at Ophelia. Her gaze traveled down to Ophelia's feet, seeing the cheap, wet boots, then up to her shivering frame and the thin uniform that offered no protection against the drafts. She looked into Ophelia's eyes and didn't see fear. She saw a mother's exhaustion. "It was an accident, Henderson," Elena said, her voice smooth and cool, cutting through the tension. "And why is my staff wearing summer weight uniforms in December? Look at her. She's freezing." Madam." Henderson stammered, his grip on Ophelia loosening. "Get her a wool coat from the boutique." "Put it on my tab," Elena commanded, stepping around the spilled coffee as if it were nothing. "And get back to work." Ophelia stood stunned, clutching the handle of her cart, watching the woman walk away. She hadn't been fired? She was getting a coat? It didn't make sense. As the elevator doors closed, cutting off the sight of the lobby, Elena pulled out her phone. Her expression shifted from indifferent to calculating. She dialed a number, speaking in rapid, sharp Russian. Find out who she is. I want to know everything. By noon, the rumor had spread through the housekeeping department like wildfire. The dragon lady spared the new girl. Nobody believed it. In the break room, the other maids eyed Ophelia with a mixture of suspicion and awe, whispering behind their hands as if she had performed a magic trick. But the proof was hanging in Ophelia's locker, a heavy, high-quality wool coat that still smelled of the boutique, warm enough to turn the Chicago wind into a harmless breeze. Ophelia touched the fabric reverently, still confused by the gesture. Kindness was a currency she wasn't used to receiving, especially not from people who lived in penthouses. 2 days later, in the dim, quiet sanctuary of the executive library, Madame Elena sat behind her desk, watching the security monitors. She wasn't looking for thieves today. She was looking for an answer. On the screen, the graining black and white footage showed the service entrance from an hour ago. Ophelia had stepped out into the freezing alley for her lunch break. But instead of eating her turkey sandwich, she had walked over to Old Joe, the homeless veteran who camped near the dumpsters. Elena watched as Ophelia split her meager lunch in half, giving the larger portion to the shivering man. She smiled at him, not a polite service industry smile, but a genuine warmth that seemed to light up the gray alley. Elena paused the video. She looked at her own hands, manicured and adorned with a diamond ring worth more than that entire alley. She had everything, yet she had never given half of anything to anyone without expecting a return on investment. Later that afternoon, Ophelia was dusting the high mahogany shelves in the library, humming softly to herself. She didn't hear the door open. When she turned, clutching a copy of A Tale of Two Cities, she nearly dropped it, finding Madame Elena standing just a few feet away. I wasn't reading it, madam, Ophelia said quickly, placing the book back. Just dusting. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times, Elena quoted softly, moving into the room. She wasn't wearing her armor of a white suit today. She looked tired, human. Do you like Dickens, Ophelia? I read it to my daughter, Lily, Ophelia answered, relaxing slightly when she saw no anger in the boss's eyes. She likes the part about the sacrifice. About doing something great for someone you love. Elena ran a finger along the spine of a leather-bound book. I haven't read for pleasure in 10 years. Only contracts. Only ledgers. She looked at Ophelia, really looked at her. It must be nice to be rich enough to share your sandwich and to have stories to tell. Ophelia paused, understanding the reference to the alley. We share what we have, ma'am. Sometimes that's all we have. For a moment, the distance between the billionaire and the maid vanished. They were just two women standing in a quiet room, burdened by different weights. Elena nodded, a sharp, decisive movement returning to her posture. She pulled an envelope from her pocket and placed it on the desk next to the dusting spray. I have work to do, Elena said, her voice cool again. She turned and walked out. Ophelia waited until she was gone before approaching the desk. It wasn't an envelope. It was a crisp $500 bill sitting under a paperweight. Panic flared. Was this a test? She grabbed the money and ran into the hallway. Madam, you forgot this. Elena stopped near the elevator but didn't turn around completely. It's a Christmas bonus. Buy the little one a proper gift. And Ophelia? The coat looks good on you. Ophelia stood stunned, clutching the money that was the difference between a bleak Christmas and a miracle. Tears pricked her eyes. But the warm moment was shattered by the rhythmic thumping of a helicopter landing on the roof, vibrating through the ceiling. Elena's phone buzzed in her hand. She looked at the screen, and the color drained from her face. The text message read 3 words that carried more threat than any weapon. Mother is here. The silence that followed Elena's entrance was louder than a gunshot. Even Manager Henderson, standing by the door, seemed to have stopped breathing. The air in the room shifted instantly. The power didn't radiate from the woman in the sable fur behind the desk anymore. It radiated from the woman in black standing over her. I was protecting our assets, Irina stammered, trying to regain her composure, though her hands twitched nervously. You heard her begging. Guilt makes people beg, Elena. Innocence makes people beg when they are terrified. Elena corrected, her voice ice cold. She turned her back on her mother, the ultimate sign of dismissal, and walked straight to Ophelia. The security guard stepped back as if Elena were radioactive. Elena knelt on the expensive Persian rug, ignoring the dust, and reached out. For the first time, she touched Ophelia, her hands gentle as they grasped Ophelia's trembling shoulders. "Stand up, Ophelia," Elena said softly, pulling her up. She reached into her own pocket, pulled out a silk handkerchief, and wiped a tear from Ophelia's cheek. "Dry your eyes. You have nothing to be ashamed of." Elena stood up and turned to Mr. Henderson. The manager shrank back. "You stood there," Elena said, her voice low but carrying to every corner of the room. "You watched my mother frame an innocent woman, and you said nothing. You were ready to throw a mother and her child onto the street because you were too cowardly to speak the truth. Madam, if you ever let anyone, even my mother, speak to my staff like that again," Elena cut him off, "you won't just lose your job. You will lose your place in this city. Do you understand me?" "Yes, madam." "Absolutely." Henderson looked like he might faint. "Leave us," Elena commanded. The guards and Henderson scrambled out, closing the door. Now, only the mother and daughter remained. The atmosphere was heavy with years of unspoken resentment. Elena picked up the phone on the desk. "I am calling the council, mother. Uncle Dmitri and Uncle Alexei." Irina's eyes widened. "You wouldn't dare. I am the Grand Duchess." "You are a liability," Elena said, dialing. "You preach about strength, but you attack the weak. That is not strength. That is bullying. And it ends today." She put the phone on speaker. "Uncle Dmitri?" "Yes, it's Elena. Arrange the jet. My mother is returning to Moscow tonight. Her retirement is effective immediately." "Elena," Irina gasped, realizing she had lost. The uncles on the other end didn't argue. They knew who made the money. They knew who the real boss was. Irina stood up, snatching her purse. She looked small now, stripped of her borrowed power. She walked to the door, but paused, looking back with a mix of hatred and pity. "This weakness will destroy you, Elena. Caring for these people. It will be your undoing." Elena looked at Ophelia, who was still clutching the handkerchief, looking at Elena as if she were a guardian angel. "No, mother," Elena said. "This is not weakness. This is the first real thing I found in this cold life." Irina stormed out, the door clicking shut behind her. The storm had passed. Elena let out a long breath, her shoulders sagging slightly. She turned to Ophelia, her face softening completely, the mask of the Ice Queen gone. "I'm sorry," Elena said. "Let me make it right. Come with me, Ophelia. We have work to do." Snow fell softly over Chicago, covering the gray streets in pristine white, just in time for Christmas Eve. Inside Ophelia's modest apartment in Queens, the air smelled of hot cocoa and pine needles. It was a small space, but for the first time in years, it felt safe. Lily, dressed in her favorite red pajamas, was bouncing on the sofa, too excited to sleep. "Is she really coming, Mommy?" "The lady with the white hair." "She said she would, baby," Ophelia said, straightening the ornaments on their tiny tree. She glanced out the window just as a sleek black limousine pulled up to the curb, looking drastically out of place among the rusted sedans of the neighborhood. Neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains as the driver opened the door. A knock sounded 3 times. Ophelia opened it to reveal Madame Elena. The intimidating boss was gone. In her place stood a woman holding wrapped gifts, looking uncharacteristically nervous. She had traded her sharp suit for a soft cashmere sweater. "Merry Christmas, madam," Ophelia said, stepping back to let her in. "Please," Elena said, stepping over the threshold into the warmth. Tonight, just Elena. Lily didn't wait for introductions. She ran up to the stranger, her eyes wide. "Mommy said you saved Christmas. Are you Santa's helper?" Elena froze, unsure of what to do with the child. Then slowly, she knelt down to Lily's level. "Something like that." She handed Lily a rectangular box. Lily tore into the paper with a squeal of delight. It was the Princess Astronaut doll set, the expensive one Ophelia had looked at in the catalog but could never afford. "Wow!" Lily shouted, and without hesitation, she threw her small arms around Elena's neck. "Thank you." Elena stiffened for a second, shocked by the sudden contact. Then her eyes closed, and she hugged the child back. The ice that had encased her heart for decades didn't just crack, it melted away completely. Later, while Lily played with her doll, Elena handed Ophelia a cream-colored envelope. "For you." Ophelia opened it. Her hands flew to her mouth. It wasn't just a contract for her return. It was a promotion, head of guest relations. And underneath, a certificate for a fully funded scholarship for Lily's education. "I can't accept this," Ophelia whispered, tears spilling over. "This is too much." "Why? Why would you do this for me?" Elena smiled, and this time, it was a genuine warm smile that reached her eyes, transforming her face. "Because when you crashed into me that first day, you didn't see a walking checkbook. You didn't see a boss to be feared. You apologized to me, the person. You saw a human being." She looked at Lily, then back at Ophelia. "You saved me from turning into my mother, Ophelia. You reminded me that I have a heart." Ophelia reached out and took Elena's hand. "Thank you, Elena. Welcome to the family." As they sat by the small tree, watching the lights twinkle, the city outside was cold, but inside, everything was warm. The lonely billionaire had found a home, and the struggling mother had found a future. It was a reminder to anyone watching that kindness is the only language that the deaf can hear and the blind can see. In a world often chilled by indifference, two lonely souls found warmth not in wealth or status, but in a simple, shared moment of humanity. True power isn't wielded through fear, but through the quiet courage to protect those who cannot protect themselves. For when we strip away the titles, the heart remains the only thing that truly matters. May this story remind you that a single act of kindness has the power to melt even the coldest winter, so take a moment to share that warmth with someone you love today.